Hi, everybody. My name is Diego. I am the program director for core curriculum and file management here at LAMDL. And in this video, we're going to be talking about what offensive and defensive arguments are. We're going to learn the difference between them and the utility of them in debate rounds through this acronym called DR.MO. So before we do that, let's talk about the difference between offensive and defensive arguments. Offensive arguments are reasons that prove your arguments come first or your opponents make the world worse. So arguments come first or opponents make the world worse. If you're affirmative, it could be arguments that prove why your affirmative's plan is a good idea, maybe some solvency reasons. It could mean just the reason why your impact of the affirmative, such as climate change, is more important than the negatives arguments. Or you could be proving why your opponents make the world worse. So maybe you could be negative and arguing a turn, such as the deep sea mining turn, that the affirmative makes climate change worse as an argument. That would be considered an offensive argument. A defensive argument are reasons why your opponent's arguments are false or exaggerated. So if you're affirmative against the negative, you might just be making like no link arguments or no impact arguments, just arguments that say that the other side isn't true. If you're negative, think of this as like no solvency arguments against the affirmative. They're just reasons why your opponent's argument is false or exaggerated. They don't 100% prove that your opponent's arguments are false, but they do provide a good form of defense against them. So there's a good chance now that your opponent's arguments are false. There are generally like four types of arguments in debate that are either offensive or defensive, which you can remember through the acronym of DR.MO. And usually almost every argument falls under these four categories for the large majority of them. Okay, so let's talk about the distinction why uh, offensive and defensive arguments, why that distinction matters. So the main distinction is that offense wins debates, defense lowers the threshold for you win. In order to win debates, you must win that there is a risk of your offense being true. So one example of this is, let's say you're affirmative and you're trying to win that deep sea mining is good for the environment / climate change. This is an offensive argument because you are telling the judge that you make the world a better place and that your argument should come first. So this is an example of what this might look like. This isn't a real piece of evidence or a real tag. It's just like an example of what deep sea mining offensive argument might look like. As the affirmative, you'll probably anticipate some arguments from the negative saying that deep sea mining is worse for the environment, deep sea mining fails as a technology, things like that. But your main form of offense is you are winning, you are trying to win that deep sea mining is good for the environment and climate change. And so, in response to the negatives argument that deep sea mining makes the environment worse, you have arguments that say their evidence is false. So, deep sea mining is safe for the environment. That's a form of defense against this negatives argument that deep sea mining makes the environment worse. Against that, you also have arguments that say deep sea mining's benefits overwhelm the potential negative consequences. So you have a mix of offensive and defensive arguments here. Your defense plays a role in making sure that your offense wins you the debate. So, for example, if I were to take these away, that means you have no defense against the negatives claim, and the judge is forced to evaluate two offensive arguments. Offense from your end saying that deep sea mining is good for climate change, offense from the negative saying that you make the world worse. And you have nothing to like provide defense against that the negatives claim. If that's the case, the debate will be decided on a coin flip, and it'll essentially be like a 50-50 chance of you winning. However, if you combine your offense with some defense against the negatives claims, you'll see that your argument is more robust and it allows your offense to take more of a center stage. The defense is just lowering the threshold for you to win that your offense is true. If you have offense saying that deep sea mining is good to challenge climate change, and then you couple it with defense saying that the technology is good, it's safe for the environment, the benefits overwhelm the negative consequences, then it's lowering the threshold for the risk of that offensive claim being true. So having a risk or having a combination of offense and defense will help you win debates. Defense alone will not win you the debate at all. The reason I'm saying that is because most judges do not believe in the idea of zero risk. So let's say you're negative and in the 2NR, you are only extending arguments that say like no solvency, the plan doesn't solve, the plan is no impact, the plan just doesn't do what it says it's going to do. those arguments, like full defense 2 NRs, will never win you the debate, because as much as you're trying to minimize the chance that the affirmative is a good idea in the scenario, the judge will always think that there's at least like a 1% chance that the affirmative is good. And most judges tend to think that if there's a 1% chance, then that's fine. Like I might as well pass the plan, because most defensive claims just say that the affirmative does not solve. That's not a reason why the affirmative is a bad idea. It's just a reason why the affirmative's claims aren't 100% true. So you need some offense. Offense are just reasons why either your arguments come first or why your opponent makes the world a worse place. You need at least some of that in order to win the debate. Otherwise, judges will default to the other side and say something along the lines of like, even if I don't believe their claims are 100% true, there's always a small chance that they are, and therefore they will vote the other way. So just main thing you got to remember: offense wins debates, defense lowers the threshold for you to win. You must have offense in order to win debates, and you should couple it with some defense. So now we're going to go into the 4 categories of offensive and defensive arguments. Every argument in debate falls under these 4 categories. And remembering the acronym of DR.MO is going to be help you in categorizing them so you can understand what arguments you need to prioritize. One of the helpful things about distinguishing offensive and defensive arguments is that it helps you know what are arguments that you should spend more time on. So, for example, if I recognize that, one argument from the negative side is defensive and then the rest are offensive, then I still might want to spend more time on the offensive claims, because those are the ones that directly say the judge should not vote against me. Defense just lowers the threshold for the other side to win, but if I can knock out the offense, I should do that. So I would say that recognizing the difference between these two is important, so that way you can spend a bit more time prioritizing the offensive arguments. So the first type of argument that we see in debate a lot is just arguments that deny the other opponent's claims. So these are some from the negative side that say deep sea mining fails. Both of these are a form of deny argument, and those are defensive, because even if, as the negative, you are winning these, there's always a chance that deep sea mining could like succeed. And so these are a form of defensive arguments that only minimize affirmative solvency or minimize the affirmative's claims, but don't really push it to the other edge of saying my opponents make the world worse. So deny is a form of defensive arguments. The second letter in this acronym is R in DR.MO. These are reverse arguments. Reverse arguments just say that the opponent's claims are the exact opposite and result in a worse outcome. So this is a negative argument that says deep sea mining permanently affects the environment and growth. That turns sustainable mining. So it makes sustainable mining worse. This is a form of offensive argument because it tells the judge that my opponent's claims result in the world being worse. So this is an offensive argument and something that you should have in your last rebuttal speech, whether you're on the affirmative or the negative. For the sake of this example, I'm just using like the negative side. But again, this could, for example, be an affirmative argument against the deep sea mining counterplan when you move up a division or when you're like in a different debate. Third argument is minimize. Minimize arguments are just like a step below deny arguments. They're not saying that your opponent's claims are 100% false, but more that it's like it's not as big of a deal as the opponent is saying. So, for example, this is a defensive argument that says China dominance is overblown. So it's meant to minimize an impact that relates to China. Again, the affirmative or the negative could read this, but at the end of the day, this is a defensive argument. It's just saying that my opponent's claims are not 100% true. So a mix of deny and minimize are just defensive arguments, but R and O in the acronym of DR.MO are offensive arguments. So the last one is outweigh. Outweigh just means your arguments come first. So climate change causes extinction. This is a piece of evidence that you want to read if you are affirmative, for example, and trying to show that climate change is a much bigger impact than what the negative is saying. Or if you are reading a China impact, you would read this piece of evidence that says a war with China, even on lower levels, causes an existential nuclear war. You would use these pieces of evidence to explain why your impacts outweigh the other side. So it's a form of offensive argument because it tells the judge that even if the other side's arguments are true, our argument still comes first. It still outweighs. So this acronym is meant to help you categorize the difference between offensive and defensive arguments. The main thing you need to know is offense wins you debates, defense should help supplement your arguments so that way offense can take you to the finish line. Hope this helps.